Hey, this is Joe Gilder from HomeStudioCorner.com. Super excited today to kick off another round. This is the second round of Mix Together. In the first round, we mixed one of my songs called Mission. And now in this round, we're going to mix a song for a client of mine, a repeat client. Repeat clients are the best. And I haven't actually heard the song. I haven't downloaded the tracks. I haven't done anything. I just know they hired me to mix this, and we decided to make this into a Mix Together series. So if you're new to me and new to Home Studio Corner, or you've not done Mix Together before, the way it works is I'm going to do a series of videos, and it's going to go for as long as it needs to go until I'm finished with the mix. So each episode will be probably 15, 20 minutes, and we'll work through, and you will watch me and join me as I mix this song from start to finish. The cool part is you can download these tracks and mix them yourself along with me. So if you head over to homestudiocorner.com/MT, there'll be a place there to enter your email address to get access to these tracks. And you can even use the tracks and the song to post on your website. Say, here's my mix of Sunday Muse's song, Fool's Gold. Just make sure you reference back to the band and they get credit. They're being kind enough to let us use their song, so make sure we do good by them. One thing I've not done before, usually you've only seen my screen and my face, but you're not seeing my setup all that much. I haven't shown a lot of that. So what I'm going to do is use my phone to show you my setup. So this is my view. I see the screen in the little camera. And this is kind of how things are going down. So if we look down, my setup is, here's my rack and my desk, right? Not using any of this for mixing, right? This is very important. The cute flowery cup with a hot liquid inside. That's helpful. But the key components that I think is helpful for you, one, just if you're curious, I don't mix through this board very often. For the most part, I'm using this board for two things. My mix comes down here, channels 1 and 2, stereo mix there, and then my microphone is coming in this channel, and it's being routed to this subgroup so I can mute it. And then you couldn't hear me because it was muted. So you can see there's levels there. A couple things I'm doing here, and this is completely unrelated at all. I've got a few bits of processing on here. I've got let's turn that on. I've got a limiter. I've got a little bit of, not really any compression happening, just boosting the signal into the limiter. And I've got a gate. So you can hear probably this, when I stop talking, it gets pretty quiet. That's intentional, so you don't hear as much room sound, and a little bit of EQ on my voice. So this all gets recorded back in along with the video as I'm shooting. So that's how I do it, in case you were curious how that works. The rest of this, I use this wireless keyboard that's a little dirty. I use an Apple trackpad. This is nice because I can click and drag with 3 fingers and drag things around, and I can zoom like that. I don't do that a lot, but I like it better than a mouse. It's easier on my wrist. I sound like an old man. And then over here, this is the PreSonus fader port. It is also dirty because I use it a lot. If you see faders moving around in my mix, almost like a ghost is moving them, it's because I'm doing this and it's moving the fader. That's mainly, I use this for that and also for transport. That's the main uses here. And then over here, this is my PreSonus central station, which is just connected to that up there. I know it's not that far away. The only thing to note here is this is my mixing volume. I've set up my speakers to be at a volume I like at this with the knob right here. So when I'm mixing, when I'm starting to set levels, I'm going to turn things up until they feel at a good volume. So if things are too quiet, I'm not going to reach for this and yank it up. And if they're too loud, I'm not going to reach for this and turn it down. I'm going to leave it where it is and make adjustments inside my mix versus adjusting my volume here. This will stay the same for probably the entire video series. So I'm always listening at the same volume. And then these are headphones, Sennheiser HD650s that I will switch to occasionally just to make sure my room isn't lying to me. My monitors are these M-Audio EX66s. I don't think they make them anymore. I've had them for, at this point, coming up on 10 years, I think, and I'm used to them. These are my little Roland crap speakers. Had those for longer than these. Probably had these for 10 years, these for maybe 8. These I will use to check my mixes occasionally. They sound pretty awful, which works really well. And that's everything you need to know about my setup. Okay, so we're back. Little overview. I thought that was kind of cool. What we're going to do in this video, simply, I know it's not as fun, but if you want to join me and move along with me and I want to show you the whole process, we have to start somewhere. And this video will be us starting and getting ready to mix, if that makes sense. So let's move over to my email. This is literally the email from, this is one of my VIP members, Bob. If you're not a VIP member, you really should be. homestudiocorner.com/VIP. Just check it out. It's worth it. Bob has been a VIP member for as long as I can remember, and I've been running Home Studio Corner for years now, 8 years this year. So I've known Bob for a long time. Bob is producing this band. They're up in Pennsylvania, and he's recording them, and then he's hiring me to mix them and master. So I'm doing a mixing and mastering on this. So this is the email from Bob. He gave me the Dropbox link for the file. So let's go ahead and start downloading them. The song is Fool's Gold. We've got their mix in addition to the stems. So let's, okay, so it's not a ton of tracks. I mean, we're looking at 15 or so, which I like. That having not tons of tracks can be awesome and can also be intimidating because you have less to hide behind. Sometimes it's easier, as bizarre and stupid as that sounds, sometimes it can be easier to mix, songs with 20, 30, 40 tracks because everything kind of just blends together versus mixing smaller track counts. Everything has to sound great, and you've got to really make sure everything works together well because there's just not much that you can hide or mask problems with, if that makes sense. So what we have here, just so you know, is he sent me the stems, which is the multi-tracks, and then their mix. So I'll explain that in just a second. I like to get mixes from my clients just so I have a reference. I'm not trying to copy their mix per se. It's more if I get stuck and I'm not sure what a particular track is supposed to do in the mix or what they want it to do in the mix, it's usually helpful for me to listen to what they did in their mix to give me an idea of kind of what they were hearing. Ideally, when I pull in tracks, the tracks have been recorded and arranged in such a way that the producer, whoever recorded them, is telling me a story. And I can just listen to the tracks and I can catch his vision just by listening. And that's usually what happens. But occasionally if there's like a weird track that they had one idea and I don't know what their idea was, it's nice to go listen to their mix and listen to that. So if you're doing work for clients, whether free or paid, see if you can get them to send you one of their rough mixes just to kind of have in your back pocket as a reference to see, A, that your mix sounds better. That's always nice if your mix sounds better than your client's mix. And then also to make sure that you're not way off the mark. For example, if they have a lot of reverb on their vocal and you mix it really dry, that may be an instance where it might make sense for you to add a little bit of reverb. Maybe not as much as they had, or at least you won't be surprised when they come back and say, well, Joe, your mix vocal's really dry. We kind of wanted it to have some reverb. And then you go listen to their mix and say, oh, right, yeah, they like reverb. Those are the kind of things that having some sort of rough mix from them can help. Okay, so he says, hi, Joe. Hope the weekend has been good to you and your family. It was. I don't remember what weekend it was, but I'm sure it was fine. The rough mix and all the stems are dry with no compression, EQ, etc. So this is really a rough mix. On the rough mix, Ben set the panning. Ben's in the band. Ben set the panning as follows. And so he's telling me where he panned things. Looks like everything is mostly 50 to the left, 50 to the right, 25 left, 15 left. The thing that's panned the most are some of the vocals are panned 80 left and right, but there's no 100% left and right, which is good to know. I like to start going all the way left and right and then bring it back in if it doesn't sound right. That way I'm taking full advantage of the stereo spectrum. If you don't know what LCR panning is, left, center, right, it's this idea of if you're going to pan it anywhere, it needs to be right up the center or all the way to the left or all the way to the right. I like to start there and then see how it works. So I'm probably going to take his suggestions, probably going to ignore his panning here and do kind of what I feel because he says this is just a suggestion. Feel free to tweak and overhaul. The reason why the tone of the rough mix sound different from the stems is that the master bus for the rough mix had a couple of plugins, ARC2 and Maxim. Maxim is a limiter. ARC2 is actually, I believe, room correction software that tunes the mix to your room so it sounds more accurate. So that's going to make it sound funny for us. Typically, you disable those plugins before you do your bounce because it doesn't. No one else needs to hear that but you in your room. But that's fine. We'll get the rough idea whether it's got some weird EQ on it or not. He says, we'd like to work on our own mix in parallel to see what we can come up with just for the purpose of gaining experience. We don't want this to hold up the process, so we will go with your mix and master for the single release. The band is on board with making this a mix together series. So yeah, they had the idea of, hey, could we do this for mix together? And I said, yeah. So what's going to be cool about this, in the last series, in a lot of the mixing videos I've done, they've been my music, which makes sense. But this one's going to be for a client mix, which means at some point in this video, when I get done with my mix, I'm going to send it to them. They're going to all listen and send me their notes, and we'll do the back and forth thing. So the way I typically set up my that process with clients is I say, you're hiring me and you get essentially 3 mixes from me. You got mix 1, then you can ask for revisions, then you'll get mix 2, you can ask for more revisions, and mix 3 is the final mix. It's just a good thing to lay out up front, because in case you get someone who sends you back, Graham Cochran tells this story of a band he worked with where he sent them the first round of mixes, and for every song, they recorded like a 40-minute video of the band sitting around listening and pausing every few seconds to have these long conversations about what they wanted to change. And so he had to come back and say, hey, listen, it's going to take me hours just to listen to your videos of your requests, and that's way more time than I've allocated in budget, and you've paid me to do this mix. So what I usually ask is for bullet points of things they'd like to change. So we've already done this with Bob before, so I know kind of how they work, and I also having done a mix and master for them once already, I know kind of what they like and don't like, and so that's going to help this process go even a little more smoothly. But it'll be cool for you to see, when I'm done with my mix, Bob may come back and the band may say, hey, can we have the vocals up, a little less of this effect and something else. And that's a part of the process. What I am by no means, I can be arrogant, but I'm not so arrogant as to say my finished mix is the best way this song needs to be. There's so much that's subjective, and may come back and make a suggestion, and I'm probably, a lot of times I agree with them. I say, you know what, you're right, let's do that. And so we're going to make it custom to what they want. That's what this is all about. This is client work. This is music. It is subjective. Okay, enough of me talking. Let's go over to StudioOne. I use StudioOne by PreSonus, in case you didn't know. I've been using it for years. I was a Pro Tools guy for a long time. So we're going to call this Fool's Gold Sunday Muse, SM for Sunday Muse. We'll save it. Let me save it in a different folder. So yeah, I used Pro Tools for years. I kind of tried out StudioOne and I liked it. All right, where's it's under Bob Berger, the other song we did. So we'll just put it in here. May change the name to Sunday Muse at some point. You know what? I am going to change the name of that. Hold on, because the StudioOne references the file path from this homepage. So when I go to open it again, I want it to be right. So I'm going to change Bob Berger's folder to Sunday Muse because that's the band name. Okay, now I can stick it in there. Anyway, as I was saying, I use StudioOne. I've been using it for years. I haven't used Pro Tools in this studio in a really long time. If you use Pro Tools or you use anything else, it's completely and utterly legit. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, if you use StudioOne, you're probably going to see me do things. You're going to pick up a few more tips than you would if you're using Pro Tools, in the sense of you'll see how I do some things in StudioOne. But since I started Home Studio Corner in 2009, when I was on Pro Tools, I made it a very deliberate decision to do as much as I can to be somewhat video or DAW agnostic, right? Not making it to where it's only beneficial if you are a Pro Tools person or if you are a StudioOne person. So I'm going to be teaching and showing you concepts that can be applied whatever system you're using. Yes, the specifics will change from one to the next, but ultimately the concepts apply regardless of what system you're using. So don't let the fact that you're on a different system than me deter you. Okay, so I just opened up the file, and I'm looking just at the info. It is a 44.1, 24-bit file. Just want to make sure I set my session to the same deal. 44.1, 24-bit. They didn't give me the tempo of the song, so I will be kind of tapping that in as we go, but I will set it to bars, and we'll figure out the tempo later. And the big thing here is I'm going to use my mix template for this. So we'll set OK, and we're off to the races. StudioOne has this cute little song information thing. This, it's not terribly necessary in the sense of you have to have it, but it will embed any files I export with the title and artist name into the song, which is kind of nice. All right, so Fool's Gold, and I can put notes here, which is kind of nice. If Bob sends me tweaks, I can put them in here and kind of have them in the file so I don't lose those if I need to refer back to them later. Just so you know, real quick, this is my mixing template. I've shown you this before, probably if you've never seen it. I've got buses for all the normal tracks that I have: drums, bass, electric, acoustic, keys, vocals, background vocals. and everything in my session runs through one of these. Obviously, I'm probably not going to use most of these because it's a very small session, but they're here and I can always delete them if I don't need them. And over here are all the normal effects that I use: a room reverb, a plate reverb, a slap delay, quarter note delay, half note delay. Obviously, I don't use all of these in every mix, but I usually use one or two, and it's nice to have them already set up with their settings and some EQs in place so that I can just quickly send my vocal bus to that plate reverb and I hear it immediately, as opposed to having to set it up every single time. The only other thing in this session is my mix bus processing, which I will show you. This is the current. Now, all these things are ever changing for me, so this is just the current state, but this is how I like to do my mix bus processing. It's two compressors, a regular compressor and a multiband. The regular compressor, 2-to-1 ratio, -20 threshold, 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release, and 1 dB of additional gain, of makeup gain. Multiband compressor is split into 3 bands: 0 to 160, 160 to 2.5K, and 2.5K and up. Everything moves together. They all have the same threshold, -20, the same ratio, 2-to-1. Attack and release are 100 milliseconds, and another dB of makeup gain on this as well. Now, the reason it's set at exactly -20 is because that's the level, my average level of my mixes, because I use the K-system metering, which we'll get to later, and because I have my volume set at the exact same place every time, I know when I get the mix up to this volume that I'm used to hearing, that it's going to be kissing those compressors at just the right level to get a couple dB of gain reduction, but not too much. It's all very intentional and very deliberate. And it's also something that I developed over the years, right? I didn't just come up with this and do it. I worked on it. I kind of started seeing a pattern in the way I worked, saved that into a template, worked some more, made some changes to my workflow, saved that to a new template. So I'm always adjusting, always changing, always updating. Okay, so here's something that I'm going to do before I import these. As you can see, or maybe you can't see, so I need to zoom in. Zoom in. These files have a bunch of extra characters in them. So if I drag them into my session right now, the track names will be tamb for tambourine -final_01, right? That's how they, Pro Tools tends to export with those extra characters, and they put final on all of them, which is fine. That's nothing against them. I don't want all that in my system, and I don't want to have to go to each track and rename them. I'd rather rename them in a more efficient way. So I use an app called Name Changer. I know there's one out there called Name Mangler that a friend of mine uses as well. Name Changer is free. I loved it so much, that you get those free software that you can donate to if you like it. I almost never do that, but I did with them because it's such a helpful piece of software. So all you do is you open up the files, and I don't know if this is a PC software. It may just be Mac only, so I'm certain there are PC versions, so just kind of do your research on that. What I do is I just select the files and drag them in here. Then I have all these different commands I can use to adjust the names. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go remove characters from the end, and then all I have to do is say how many characters from the end. So if you watch, over on the right-hand side is what the new file name is going to be. So as I increase this number, we're just removing those last few characters from the end. Okay? Now, a couple of things you may notice. The snare bottom right here got reduced too much because it doesn't have the spaces here. So what we're going to do is we're going to ignore, we're not going to put that one in here. So by unchecking it, none of this applies. So all of these are now being changed. So instead of being tambourine -final_ whatever, we're just removing that final, removing the space. And okay, now that's one step too far. We go back. Now everything looks a lot better. I hit rename complete. Look over here. Now look, all the files have been fixed. And now I can do the same thing here. I can take all of these, clear them out. Well, I didn't think it would clear them all. Now let me just fix this one right here. Since this one has less characters, they didn't put spaces there. I only need to do, there we go. Rename that one. Now look, they're much easier to identify, okay? So now I can import them into my session. So thank you, Name Changer. You are a lifesaver. I hope you get lots of donations from this video because you are incredible. And no, they're not a sponsor. Although, hit me up, Name Changer. I'm sure the home recording crowd is your target market. Actually, it probably is because we get files with all sorts of weird names in there. Okay, so files are here. I'm going to hit save. StudioOne does this thing where it leaves the files in another folder and just references them unless you tell it to save. So I have a setting set up to when I hit save, it asks, do I want to copy external files? And the answer is always yes. So boink, now it's taking them out of my download folder and copying them to my session folder. That's just the way Pro Tools works by default. At least it did when I used to use it. I don't know why StudioOne works that way. I'm guessing it's for people who are dragging in loops from a certain like library, and they just don't want to copy the files, or they just want to reference other folders. It's nice to have that option, I suppose, but I just don't like it. Okay, so now I've got all the sessions, all the tracks in here. All my audio tracks are on the left. I've got my buses on the right, because that's how I roll. And now we're going to just quickly organize them and maybe rename a few and just make sure we know what all we have here. All right, so I like to put drums and bass towards the top. Now, one of the cool things about this band is, at least in the last song, and I'm assuming it's going to be the same here, the drummer plays standing up, and it's more of a percussion thing than it is a traditional drum kit. In the last song, at least, the drummer, there was no kick drum. It was just basically he played a tom as if it was a kick drum. Does that make sense? So there was no kick drum in the session. He would play the tom, and that would kind of act as the kick drum. So very different vibe and pretty cool. So let's see here. Mandolin. Okay, there's the tom. Floor tom here. So we're going to put the floor tom up top where I would normally put the kick drum, and we're just going to assume that's where it goes. All right, I'm going to color coordinate. I like drums to be blue, bass to be red, guitars, they can be a cool green. StudioOne, can you give me more color choices? That would be awesome. All right, CVox 1 and HVox 1 and 2. I don't know what C, maybe C means Caitlin, the lead singer. Yeah, that's probably what it means. And then HVox probably means harmony, would be my guess. So we'll make the harmonies purple, and HVox, I like my lead vocals to all be yellow. And so I'm going to take all these lead vocals, and send them to my vocal bus, and that's how this is going to roll. And I can process them all together. If I need to separate them out, I can, but that's kind of, you'll see very quickly as you follow along, that's kind of how I like to do this. So now that I've got things color-coded and in the right place in the session, I'm going to route them. So let me zoom in so you can see. These are going to the drums bus. The bass is going to the bass bus. I've explained this 1,000 times, but I'll do it here. I like to, even though I only have one bass track, I still like to send it to a bass bus because sometimes I may duplicate the bass. I may do different things to it. I like to have the processing over here on this bass bus and the individual tracks over here. I also like the idea of having everything in my session going through these red tracks over here, so I can always come right here and just kind of sit in this section and work on the mix from here. Then I can kind of come up for air and adjust individual tracks as needed, but this is kind of where I live. And it makes for a much simpler mixing experience. Okay, so vocal, we'll go to the vocal bus, which I abbreviate VOX. Don't know where that came from. It's just the way I've always heard it done, the way I started. I'm going to make an executive decision here. Acoustic guitars and mandolins typically are not the same, right? The mandolin's much higher. I doubt I'm going to use the same processing on both. So I'm going to send the mandolin, a woman named Mandolin, to its own bus. So the electric bus obviously isn't being used in this session. So I'm going to send the mandolin to a mando bus. Same thing as the bass. There's just one bus for one track. I'm okay with that. It's just kind of the way I like to do it. So I'm deleting the keys bus because there are no keys, no keyboards, and everything looks right. So this is going to be fun. I like smaller track sessions just because there's not as much to sift through. It'll be pretty easy to understand what to do once we start listening, and we will dive in. So the next step for me is to start listening, obviously, setting levels, and doing my static mix, which means no plugins, just messing with levels, volume, and panning. That's what we'll do in the next video. I know this is probably a little bit longer than the normal series of videos will be, but I wanted to get all the setup stuff out of the way in this first video so we can get over it and move on to the fun stuff. One quick note, if you are doing mixing a lot, I would recommend doing this process on a separate day than when you book the mixing session. Typically, I would imagine you're going to sit down and mix a song and give yourself a 3-4 hour block to do a lot of the mixing. If you spend the first 30 minutes doing this stuff, it's kind of anticlimactic. And you're kind of, at this point, I'm not super excited to mix because I've spent all this time color coding, changing names, downloading files, setting up the session. I like to do that like at the end of the day before, when I'm maybe just, zoning out, listening to music, watching a YouTube video in the background, and have this up and doing this setup stuff. Because I don't need, we haven't listened to anything yet. We're just bringing files and organizing files. It's really administrative work. If you have an intern or an assistant, have them do it. It's fabulous. I don't. I've only got Nash. Nash, come here. He's only a year old. Look how slow he moves. Oh, you just so slow. I don't even know if you can see him. Come here. Can you jump up? Come here. Oh, I woke him up. He's tired. Anyway, he doesn't know how to do this, so I have to do it myself. Anyway, that's it for me in this video. Thanks so much for watching this. Again, go to homestudiocorner.com/MT, download these tracks, do this, and then join me on the next video, and we will rock through this mix together. See ya.